My mother-in-law made it clear that anyone unwilling to contribute to household chores was unwelcome in her home. She seemed to expect an apology from me, perhaps even some remorse. Meanwhile, my husband sat beside her, a subtle smirk playing on his lips, as if he took pleasure in watching me being reprimanded. But to their surprise, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. "I'll leave," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. It was the first time I felt no hesitation in the face of their demands. In that moment, I realized it was no longer my concern to worry about their actions or attitudes. They would eventually have to face the consequences of their behavior. My name is Elizabeth, and I'm 40 years old. I balance a full-time job with managing our household. My husband, Andrew, and I have 3 adult children who have moved out to start their own lives. When we envisioned this stage of our lives, it was supposed to be our time to enjoy each other's company. But everything changed when my mother-in-law, widowed and needing companionship, moved in with us. Her arrival shifted the dynamic in our home, which had once been peaceful and shared only between Andrew and me. My job is demanding, often requiring late hours at the office, and by the time I return home, I am exhausted. The sight that greets me only adds to my frustration. The living room is cluttered with snacks and clothes, and Andrew, seemingly oblivious to the chaos, lounges on the sofa with his beer and TV, barely acknowledging my presence. No dinner is prepared, leaving me to handle the kitchen duties myself, my disappointment growing with every passing minute. My mother-in-law, often emerging from her room, criticizes me for being late or for my business trips, claiming I have no excuse for neglecting the home. She accuses me of failing as a homemaker, turning every minor issue into an attack on my character. Over time, I've learned that responding only escalates the situation. It's better to let her have her say and wait for her to calm down. Though this approach isn't ideal, it prevents further arguments and keeps the peace, at least for a while. I absorb her criticisms in silence and redirect my focus to preparing dinner. Though her words sting, I push through, knowing they will stop eventually. What's harder to tolerate, however, is my husband's reaction. He seems to take pleasure in watching me be scolded by his mother. "Women should appreciate their husbands. You lack charm," she often says, and he echoes her, mocking me as I lay the dinner table. My anger isn't just directed at her, it's growing toward Andrew as well. Despite my repeated pleas for them to start dinner without me when I'm late, they never do. They sit idly by, waiting for me to serve them, as though I'm their servant. The dynamic in our home has worsened since my mother-in-law moved in. Before her arrival, Andrew was a true partner, helping around the house, cooking when I was late, and actively participating in raising our kids. But now, he's stopped helping altogether and joined his mother in her constant criticism. It's confusing and frustrating. She calls me lazy and incompetent, yet she's the one relying on us. She hasn't contributed financially despite inheriting money from her late husband. Instead, she squandered it on luxuries and accumulated debt. Now she lives with us, virtually rent-free. This tension began the moment she moved in. She promised to be considerate, even bowing deeply in a show of sincerity. But within a day she reverted to her old ways, criticizing my housekeeping. At first, it was almost amusing, but it quickly became serious. She accused me of being a poor wife because of my focus on work, criticizing not only my housekeeping but my professional commitments as well. I tried explaining that my job sometimes demands late hours, but my words fell on deaf ears. Instead, she suggested I take a part-time job at the local supermarket, as if that would somehow be more suitable. She had a fixed idea of what a daughter-in-law should be like, but little understanding of the realities of my job. Living with her became increasingly difficult. Every dissatisfaction, even with something as trivial as our meal choices, led to complaints. Even simple routines like breakfast became issues. We used to grab bread or buy lunch, but she disapproved of these habits. Reluctantly, she began following our household rules, but not without constant grumbling. Dinner time became the focal point of contention. She insisted it be served promptly at 7:00 p.m. with at least 3 side dishes, demanding that everyone eat together. She claimed this was what normal families did, but my work often kept me well past 7:00 p.m., making her demands unreasonable. She doubted the necessity of my job, suggesting Andrew's income should suffice and implying that my work was more a matter of personal choice than financial necessity. When I looked to Andrew for support, he simply dismissed my concerns, suggesting I'd learn my lesson eventually. His lack of defense only deepened my frustration. He seemed content to play the indifferent husband, incapable of contributing to household chores. This behavior irritated me even more because when we first moved in with my mother-in-law, he had promised to support me. But since then, he had aligned himself with her, abandoning his role as my partner. They had teamed up against me, treating me unfairly. Whenever I tried to involve Andrew in the housework, my mother-in-law would promptly interject, declaring that such tasks were the wife's responsibility. Andrew, to my growing frustration, never challenged her. This shift in dynamics left me bewildered. We had always worked well together before, but now something had changed. Over time, I began to notice a disturbing pattern. Each time his mother criticized me, Andrew would smirk, almost as if he found it amusing. That's when it hit me. Maybe he resented the fact that I earned more than he did and felt uncomfortable with the idea of sharing household duties as a result. This realization made me rethink many aspects of our relationship and how it had shifted since his mother moved in with us. Andrew, traditionally seen as the family provider, couldn't openly express dissatisfaction, but I began to suspect that he was secretly enjoying the situation. When his mother first moved in, she frequently criticized my role in the household, openly questioning whether Andrew was truly the head of the family. There was a certain satisfaction he seemed to derive from being scolded, which revealed a side of him I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Despite all the years we've been together, I felt like I was discovering a different person entirely. The atmosphere at home, once peaceful, was now clouded with constant tension. My mother-in-law's incessant complaints and Andrew's failure to stand up for me made everything harder. Before she arrived, I had never felt the need to question our relationship, but now, everything felt unstable. I spent many anxious days wondering what to do next. One afternoon, while I was out shopping, a neighbor approached me with a remark that caught me completely off guard. She suggested I should be more considerate towards my mother-in-law. Surprised, I asked her to elaborate. She confessed that although she wasn't fond of her own mother-in-law, she didn't consider herself inconsiderate. Then she shared something unsettling. My mother-in-law had been talking about me behind my back. According to her, I neglected all the housework. The house was always a mess, and the laundry was never done. She claimed her rheumatism was getting worse because she had to do the chores herself, especially with Andrew coming home late from work. Hearing how I was being portrayed as a neglectful wife who only relied on bread for meals, leaving my mother-in-law to complain about everything, was shocking. It quickly became clear that the cold, unfriendly reactions I was receiving from the neighbors were the result of the stories my mother-in-law had been spreading. Despite her small, frail appearance, she knew exactly how to manipulate others, painting herself as a victim of a lazy daughter-in-law who shirked all household duties. The look the neighbor gave me was one of cold accusation, a reflection of how these harmful tales had shaped people's perception of me. I felt a deep sense of embarrassment, realizing that our family issues had become fodder for neighborhood gossip. I muttered a quick denial and rushed back home, hoping to avoid further confrontation. As I entered the living room, I braced myself for the next round of criticism. I found my mother-in-law engrossed in her TV show, snacking away as usual. Taking a deep breath, I approached her firmly, saying, "Please stop spreading rumors." To my dismay, she just laughed and brushed it off, insisting, "But it's true." Something inside me snapped. If she was determined to keep spreading these lies, then I would no longer play the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law. The very next day after returning from work, I was met with the usual demands for dinner. This time, however, I bypassed both my husband and my mother-in-law's complaints and went straight to the kitchen. I prepared just a single serving of instant ramen for myself. When my mother-in-law saw what I was doing, her face turned crimson, and her protest grew louder. "So you're just proving you're the worst daughter-in-law, huh? Not doing any housework, not even cooking dinner. Fine, if that's how you want it," she snapped angrily. I continued eating my noodles in silence, unbothered by her outburst. Eventually, she turned to Andrew, seeking his support. When he approached me, I laid everything out. "Mom's been telling everyone that I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who neglects the housework." When I confronted her, she just doubled down on her lies. "So I've decided to stop doing it altogether. I'm just doing what she's been telling everyone I do." I shared what the neighbor had told me the day before. Andrew, looking concerned, tried to mediate. "She probably just exaggerated. Don't be so stubborn," he said, despite his mother clearly being in the wrong. But once again, he sided with her. Exhausted and drained, I discarded the empty ramen cup and ignored his pleas. I walked away and retreated to the bathroom, where I did my laundry and took a long, quiet bath. As I soaked, a wave of relief washed over me. It became clear that, no matter how hard I tried, I was always going to be seen as the bad wife. From that moment on, I made the decision to stop engaging in the household tasks my mother-in-law criticized me for. She bemoaned the lack of freshly baked bread for breakfast on my days off, but I remained resolute. When I woke up the next morning and stepped into the living room, she demanded that I go out and buy bread immediately. In response, I looked at her and said, "Why don't you buy it yourself? I'm such a bad wife, after all. I'll only buy my share from now on. You'll need to pay for your own food or handle it yourself." With that, I ignored her protests, made myself coffee, and quickly ate my bread. As I watched her reaction, part of me wondered if I had been too harsh, but after everything I had endured, it felt justified. After finishing my breakfast, I tidied only my part of the cluttered living room and settled down with a book. The calm didn't last long, however. The doorbell rang. I glanced at the monitor, bracing myself for whatever came next. I was startled to see a group of more than 4 elderly people, familiar faces I knew well, standing in front of my door with visibly upset expressions. Confused, I watched as my mother-in-law hurried to greet them, and they filed into the house one after the other. I was taken aback when one of them sharply addressed me. "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even care for her mother-in-law." It turned out these visitors were my mother-in-law's siblings and their spouses. She had spread false tales about me, accusing me of neglecting her by not feeding her properly and not letting her bathe. As the youngest of 4, she had a large support network, and now, with their spouses included, there were 8 elderly people in my living room, all labeling me as a demon wife deserving of retribution. Their accusations made my heart race with fear. "This is a misunderstanding," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling. But the eldest brother raised his voice, pounding his cane on the floor. "Stop making excuses," he bellowed. The others joined in, demanding that I apologize and reflect on my supposed wrongdoings. Just then, my husband arrived, drawn by the commotion. When my mother-in-law's brother criticized my upbringing, I waited for him to defend me, but instead, he joined in, adding his own criticisms. In that moment, my affection for him vanished. I had always believed my husband to be a kind man, but living with my mother-in-law had shown me the truth. He wasn't kind, he was simply weak, easily swayed by those around him, and unable to stand up to any pressure. During the heated exchange, one of my mother-in-law's brothers even suggested that we get a divorce. To my horror, everyone seemed to agree. My mother-in-law then offered me a so-called second chance, but only if I promised to change and serve both her and my husband better in the future. Trying to hold back tears, her siblings urged me to be grateful, claiming that I would never find a kinder mother-in-law anywhere else. They even decided to implement a rotating schedule, taking turns each week to check if I was keeping up with the housework and attending to my husband and mother-in-law's needs adequately. Once their plans were set, everyone appeared content and left to celebrate with a sushi outing. As they departed, my mother-in-law couldn't resist a parting shot, telling me to ensure the house was clean and the laundry done by the time they returned. Alone in the cluttered living room, I was left to wonder how everything had escalated to this point. Tears began to well up. Our marriage had been happy until my mother-in-law's interference. Now, despite all my efforts, I found myself the subject of complaints from all of them. The tears streamed down my face, a mix of sadness, regret, and anger. A few hours later, my husband and mother-in-law came home. I was still sitting in the disarrayed living room when my mother-in-law smirked at me. "See, we don't need a wife who can't do housework," she sneered. "I told you to clean up earlier, didn't I?" Seemingly tipsy, she demanded that I leave immediately. My husband, grinning, joined in, probably thinking his support would make me comply quietly. But I had reached my limit. I no longer had any desire to do anything for them. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly, standing up. As I turned to leave, I heard my mother-in-law and husband laughing, probably assuming I was bluffing. But their reactions didn't matter to me anymore. I went to my room, packed my things, and left without another word. A week later, my mother-in-law called me, panicked. "Andrew says he has no money." "What does that mean?" she asked frantically. I responded bluntly, "Andrew earns only a third of what I do. I've been covering most of our expenses. The house is in my name, and I'm planning to sell it, so you'll need to leave soon." She thought I was joking until I urged her to check the bank statements in her drawer. There was silence on the other end of the phone as the reality of the situation sank in. Then, the begging started. She pleaded for me to return, saying Andrew was lonely. But I was resolute. I'm proceeding with a divorce through my lawyer, I told her, ending the call and ignoring her tearful apologies. With the help of my lawyer, I filed for divorce, citing my mother-in-law's unbearable behavior and my husband's lack of support. The divorce was granted quickly, and I even received a small settlement. When I explained the situation to my children, they were supportive, agreeing that the fault lay squarely with my husband and his mother. After the divorce, I sold the house, and my ex-husband and mother-in-law were forced to move out and stay with relatives temporarily. Their stay was short-lived, though, as they soon had to find a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet on his modest income. From what I've heard, they now spend their days blaming each other for their misfortunes. Meanwhile, my ex-husband has been sending frequent messages asking for reconciliation, claiming he's cut ties with his mother. But these messages have become more of a nuisance than anything, and I'm considering blocking him to maintain my peace. Without their constant criticism, I feel liberated. I'm ready to live my life on my own terms, focusing on my own fulfillment and well-being.